All right, good afternoon, everyone. We want to thank you for joining us today for NAGDA's third webinar of 2019. Today, presenter Daniel Powell, a recently promoted Senior Personnel Analyst from the City of Los Angeles, will share methods for using data and goals and data-driven processes to drive improvement in retirement outcomes for your plan participants. So we're really looking forward to this one today, and we're glad all of you could join us. Daniel Powell is the Plan Administration Manager for the City of Los Angeles Deferred Compensation Plan, a supplemental 457 retirement savings program with over $6.5 billion in assets and more than 48,000 active and retired participants. He's been with the plan for about 3 years and has enjoyed finding new ways to engage employees and to meaningfully measure employee outcomes. So hopefully he can share some of that knowledge with you today. Before his time at the City of LA, he worked for Apple while completing his degree in philosophy from Cal State University in Fuller. His work at Apple fostered his passion for creatively leveraging technology and exceptional customer service. Before we get started today with the presentation, we want to let you know about a few housekeeping items. First, please remain muted with your video turned off throughout the call so the presentation isn't interrupted. We have designated time at the end of the presentation for a question and answer period. Throughout the webinar, you can submit questions anytime using the chat feature. Your questions will only be visible to staff, and we will answer as many of them as we can get to at the end. We are recording this presentation and we'll post it on the webinar archive of the website for you and for anyone who wasn't able to make it today to refer to as needed. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Daniel. Daniel, take it away.
Great. Well, good morning or afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. So this is a presentation that explores how plan sponsors can lead their defined contribution plans through the lens of measurable employee outcomes. And I appreciate the opportunity to share some of our experiences at the City of LA and hopefully find some things here that will maybe spark an interest or you'll find some strategies that you can apply to your plans. And hopefully through this process, you'll see how leveraging data and adopting meaningful goals can bring clarity to your decisions as a plan sponsor. And I really wanted this presentation to be as practical as possible. So to kind of give you real world examples, you'll see I include a lot of screenshots of reports that we produce and data reports and the reports that we present to our policymakers. So we'll jump in. So the first the key question that we start from, it's kind of rudimentary, but we need a solid foundation. So our question is, what do you want for your employees? Just really, really high level, big picture. At the end of the day, why does your program exist? And for the city's deferred compensation plan, it's fairly simple. We want to help all of our full-time employees achieve retirement income security. And we hear that phrase a lot, retirement income security, and it's a good phrase, but we need to break it down a little bit further. So we define retirement income security as 100% replacement of an employee's lifestyle income upon retirement. And we define lifestyle income as an employee's salary at retirement minus their payroll deductions for retirement saving. So that's their pension and deferred compensation plan contributions. And in simple terms, it really means we want employees to be able to maintain their standard of living from employment throughout their retirement. And I've got a nice little chart that we use to express that. So we assume a 30-year career plus with their pension income. And city employees don't contribute to Social Security, so that's a factor we have to look at. Plus their deferred compensation plan savings, and that's retirement income security for us. So that's the kind of really high level goal, but we have to break it down even a little bit further. So over the years, we've always looked at participation. That's kind of our headline metric. We want as many of our employees as possible to enroll in the plan, and we want them to enroll in the plan as soon as possible. So that's a key goal, and that always has been. But over time, we decided that wasn't sufficient. We needed to expand that a little bit. Because someone could enroll in the plan and they sign up and $10 every pay period maybe won't quite get them to retirement income security. So the next part of the goal, a few years later, we expanded. We said, okay, we need employees to contribute a little bit more. They have to save enough to close that gap between their working income and what their pension is going to provide. And for most employees, their pension is going to provide somewhere between 60 and 70% of their working income. And then as time went on, there's this long evolution because this is a process. We said, okay, but it's not just enough to have employees retire with just a big bag of money and a large sum. We want that to be translated into lifetime income. So for retired employees, we want to translate their savings into lifetime income, and that means encouraging employees to not just take a giant distribution and close out their account when they retire. We want them to think of that as income that they're going to need throughout their retirement. That also means for us encouraging employees to not roll their funds to another provider, because we think we have designed our plan with them in mind, with lifestyle income in mind, and we think that our fees are really competitive and we've got their best interests at heart, so we want to keep them with our plan throughout retirement. Oops, just skip ahead. So now we've kind of got our four, our tent posts, our four goals here, really, really broadly, but we need to kind of give some substance to it. So how do we do that? And I've kind of put our process into three key areas here. And I kind of use a hiking theme, so that's kind of fun. So we want to know the terrain, we want to travel together, and do it one step at a time. So we'll go into these in more detail. So starting with know the terrain, so that's exploring your data. So many years ago, what we used to do as a plan is we would rely on reporting from our record keeper. They would put together these really great reports each quarter telling us, how many enrollments we had, how many distributions, just some, standard metrics about the plan. And these are usually pretty cookie cutter format, but they would customize the data for our plan. So they're useful, but because they can be cookie cutter, you might miss out on specific insights unique to your population. So over time, we would ask the record keepers that we've worked with to make modifications to try to highlight things we thought were especially pertinent for our population, and things that we thought our policymakers, our board, would find especially helpful in making decisions about the plan. But then, we kept evolving, so we would keep wanting to explore the data more thoroughly. So we started to explore the data ourselves by pulling participant level reports from our record keeper. And it was a tedious process because our record keeper, until recently, didn't have all the information we needed about our participants in their system. We, on our biweekly transmittals to the record keeper, wouldn't include demographic information. So if we wanted information on, participant outcomes by department or job position or labor organization, they wouldn't have that kind of information. So we'd pull this big report from our record keeper, all the information they had about our participants. We'd pull a big report from our payroll systems, and there were 2 payroll systems. It's kind of messy. And we would combine that information together and work with a whole lot of pivot tables. So I got a nice little sample pivot table here. And we would have lots and lots and lots of pivot tables. It was kind of messy, but it worked. And this allowed us to look at the data ourselves and play around with the data and have fun with it and be curious. And, one thing I really want to drive home, and I'll probably emphasize, is I think one of the keys to being successful with this is being curious about your participants and being curious about the data. So we would look at things from a ton of different vantage points. We would know our headline participation rate. It's around 70% at the time, but how does that rate look if we slice it by age or years of city service or department or labor organization or gender, all these different vantage points. And sometimes, the information you found wasn't that interesting and it was maybe what you'd expect, or maybe it's in line with the population at large. But every once in a while you'd stumble upon, hey, there's this huge department right down the road and they have a super low participation rate compared to every other department. And that's an opportunity for us. That's where we can really dig in and make a meaningful impact. And so that's kind of where the process started. And as time has gone on, we're always trying to get more sophisticated and do better with the way we look at our data. And so the latest trend we have is in the last year, we've been moving from Excel to another program called Power BI. So here's a sample of it here. And Power BI is designed to be if you haven't used it, it's another Microsoft program, and it's really a visually and interactively focused way of looking at your data. And so actually to talk about that a little bit, I'm gonna pull up Power BI and we can take a look at it together. So I'm gonna pull up here, you should be able to see on your screen, this demographic analysis we did this February of this year. And this is a great worksheet for us to just kind of dive in and play around with the data and see what we find. So what you're looking at here at the top left, we have participation rate by department and gender. So each department, we've got a blue bar for male participation rate, orange for female, sorted from highest participation rate to lowest. So that's really interesting. Then to the right of that, we have our participation rate and contribution rate by our labor organizations. We have a number of those agreements here, those MOUs. We've got all of our job titles in the city, so all the different job classes. And then on the bottom left here, our gender analysis. And the reason this is powerful is that's a nice report in itself, and someone might find that interesting, but the real value is in being able to interact with it. So I can go over to our MOU analysis here, and I can click on the clerical MOU. That's a pretty big one. It's got almost 4,000 eligible employees, a participation rate of 64%, and a contribution rate of over 5%. But by clicking on it, I'm able to see, well, where are these employees? So all these employees in that MOU, well, now I can see here are the departments they're represented in. Here's how they're doing male versus female. Here are the job classifications that are in that MOU. And we got a number of them here, and I can see, okay, the senior administrative clerks, they're right around the average. The secretaries are doing great. But you know what, office trainees, not so great. Administrative clerks, not so great. So this kind of tells us where we need to start focusing our efforts. And we can do the same thing here. If I go down to our bottom left table and click on female employees, I can see, all right, now all my data is through the lens of female employees. And I can see in MOU 3, that same clerical MOU, I can see female employees have a 67% participation rate in that MOU versus male employees that have 52%. So the female are outperforming the male employees there. So this is kind of, we're still trying to learn this. It's a steep learning curve, but we're having a lot of fun with it. And this has been a really invaluable resource in looking at the data in new ways and really being collaborative with our managers and our policymakers, because in real time now, if someone just out of curiosity wants to know, hey, how's that MOU 9 doing? We can quickly drill down. And so I'll jump back to the presentation here. And you'll see some other ways we've used this resource. This has been kind of our standard participation report. So we've got a Power BI report that offers kind of an overview at each of our core goals. You'll see at the bottom left there, participation, contributions, distributions, and asset retention. And we provide a quick look at which departments are doing well, how many enrollments we've got for the fiscal year to date, and how our participation rate is looking by age group as well as gender. And so, you know, the key here, I think, too, is always looking for new ways to slice and dice your data and not kind of getting stuck in one format. And then here's another example looking at our asset retention, so outgoing rollovers, as we try to reduce the number of those outgoing rollovers that occur. So the next part here is, so we've looked at our data, we've kind of found interesting ways to play with it, but we don't want to keep that data to ourselves. We really need to share that with our key stakeholders. And the first key stakeholder is your policymakers. So here's an example I've got of a screenshot of a report we bring to our policymakers. And we'll bring them reports on a quarterly basis on our core goals, but then we also bring them ad hoc reports as much as possible. We put in data as much as we can related to the topics we're discussing, because it's important that when we bring recommendations to our board, we want to know that they're working from the same data set that we are. They have the same insights we do, and that we're all on the same page about the nature of our population. So for example, we recently implemented a percent of pay contribution feature when we transitioned record keepers, so that employees could contribute a percentage instead of a dollar amount. So when we talk about percent of pay, we don't just say, hey, here's this great feature, here's how it works. We're constantly saying, telling them, how many employees are using this feature? Is it more popular with employees who have been around a while or with new employees? When new enrollees sign up for the plan, what percentage of them are, which percentage of them are using percent of pay versus fixed dollar amount? Is it more popular with certain departments? And being curious with the data and finding all those insights really is able to give them a lot of context when making decisions. And so you'll see here, this is our report on gender and age review and participation, contribution, and risk tolerance patterns. And this was data that we came across just using that Power BI methodology I was talking about just a minute ago. And then the next key stakeholder here, we also want to share our data with our participants. And we think this is really important, and this is something we only started to do recently, but your participants are key stakeholders in the plan. We think they should know how the plan's doing, what are the trends, is it healthy? But it's also important so they know how, well, we found it helpful because we talk about participation rate here. So this is a screenshot of our website. You'll see we highlight the 73% participation rate. And I can't tell you how many conversations we've had with employees because that number was new to them. They hadn't seen it before. And we've had retirees tell us they just couldn't believe that there are 27% of their colleagues out there who haven't enrolled in the plan. We hear that from employees too. And it's a great conversation starter to tell them, hey, that's true, and you can make a difference. You can talk to your colleagues. You can tell them about why you are in the plan and why that's important. And it's also important to show them stats like the average savings rate. So we've shown that there's about a 7% average contribution rate. And I think everyone always wants to know how they stack up against their peers and maybe a little bit of a competitive nature. So when they see that number, they kind of wonder, okay, well, what am I saving? How am I doing? And how do I compare to everyone else? And we saw that really tangibly when recently we were doing a new employee orientation for newly hired LAPD cadets. And the police department at the city has a really high participation rate. It's around 90%. So we usually don't have trouble enrolling them in the plan, but we thought maybe we can see if we can increase the amount that they contribute. So typically new cadets would enroll and they would contribute $100 per pay period or so, 50, 100, maybe 150. But this time around, instead, we just talked about the percent of pay feature. We gave examples about, here's what percent of pay would look like for your pay. If you were to do 5%, here's what it would work out to each pay period. And we just let them know, hey, the average citywide is 7%. So if you wanted to do the average, what your colleagues are doing, it would be around 7. And believe it or not, almost all of them decided to do 7%, if not more, because everyone wanted to do a little bit better than the competition. No one wants to fall behind. So we saw 7, 9, 10% was the most common contribution rate. And so we share this data as much as we can. You can see we have it on the website. We update this every quarter. We share it in our quarterly newsletters. When we have blog posts on the website, we sprinkle in data as much as we can. And our participants have really indicated that they find that interesting. And so then the next part of the stakeholders here is we know that a way to make really meaningful impacts with our participants is by having messaging about our plan come from a number of different stakeholders, not just us, because people need to hear things from people they trust. So we really try to get our stakeholders like department heads, elected officials, and union leaders working with us and coordinating our messaging. But part of this also means sharing our data with them. So you'll see on the screen here, this is an example of a letter we now regularly send to department heads, including elected officials and our union leaders. So we tell them how their members or how their employees are doing compared to the workforce at large and next to the national benchmark. And this has also sparked a lot of interest because no department head wants to get a report saying that their employees are maybe participating at 50% when the rest of the city is at 73. They want to make sure that they're doing right by their employees and that their employees know about their benefits And we, just by sending these letters out, have gotten tremendous interest and feedback in trying to do more targeted outreach with our populations. So I'll talk a little bit more about that, but this is just an important resource and maybe something you'd want to consider for your plan. And then the last part here is finding ways to collect feedback from your employees, because your participants, that's another type of feedback. And if, for us, that means focus groups, sometimes targeted by topic, or sometimes general and plan-wide surveys. But then we also, and I call these release valves, want to have release valves after every interaction. So it's really important for us that anytime a participant interacts with the plan, that they have a channel to give feedback. And that's helps us assess how the plan is doing in real time. And it also allows us to intervene if there's some kind of interaction that happened that wasn't positive, but we see that we can step in and correct the situation. And that's been a really helpful resource. And so we've got feedback through our different channels. So we have our website, the call center, our local office at City Hall. No matter how a participant interacts with us, they have a way to give feedback. And recently we actually made an innovation with our local office. We have a sign-in sheet, so if someone comes in to talk to a retirement counselor at City Hall, our local office, they would sign in on a paper sheet, and we would just use that to track how many people came in. But just this year, we switched it to a digital interface. We have an iPad with an online check-in system, which makes it more easy to look at metrics, and we can see more quickly when our busy times are and when we need more staffing. But it also allows us to collect email addresses for everyone who visits, and then each week we send out a survey to the participants asking them how their experience was. Here's a little snippet of that survey. And that's been really great because our local counselors do great work, and we get to highlight some of the positive feedback we get from our participants. But it also means if there was some kind of misunderstanding and confusion about the plan and there was an unhappy person, someone on our staff can reach out to that person and get things straightened out. So this is where the rubber meets the road. So now we've kind of done our research. We've talked to all of our stakeholders and got them on the same page. And the next part is adopting goals around these outcomes. So you'll see a snippet of our report here where we recommend to the board some specific goals around our 4 key outcomes. So we wanted to increase enrollments for that fiscal year by 6%. We wanted to increase contributions by 0.5%, decrease account closures by 0.5%, and decrease outgoing rollovers by retirees by 0.5%. And I'm sure everyone's familiar with that acronym SMART for your goals. And that's really relevant here. So you want your goals to be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-based. And you would take that same methodology to making goals for your plan. And the next part here is we really want to bring our service providers along with us. So your third-party administrator, they have the resources to help you meet your goals, and they've certainly done that for us. And they're the ones on the front lines interacting with your participants. So you'd want to work with them to ensure that all the work they perform is in alignment with your core goals. And one unique step the City of LA took in that area is by spelling out our core goals in our contract with our TPA and designating them as performance guarantees. So we're constantly working with the TPA to ensure that we're working hand in hand, making progress toward these goals together. And so you'll see on the screen here, this is a snippet from our quarterly report from our TPA. And you'll see it gives a progress update on progress toward our participation goal. We weren't quite making it quite yet, but that's okay. And it gives an update to the board, lets them know how we're doing, and it gives them some historical context to see how enrollments for prior fiscal years, how those were going. And then here's another snippet here. This is also from our quarterly report from our TPA. And so we want to know who are the superstars doing really great from departments that are participating in the plan, and what are the bottom 10 departments that are not doing so great and that need more of our attention. And this, evolved as well. We honed it down to full-time employees because some departments had part-time employees that were eligible, but they're not part of our core goal, and try to get trying to reach retirement income security. And we also had some departments that were really tiny that would kind of fluctuate a lot from month to month. So we spelled out that these were full-time employees with greater than 50 eligible participants. And then another innovation we wanted to showcase here is working with our TPAs, which is Voya. They have this really great retirement calculator, the My Orange Money calculator, and it was very similar to the kind of goals we set for our plan in reaching retirement income security. But underneath it, we had some different methodologies. You know, we didn't have Social Security. We wanted to deduct our retirement plan contributions from the goal in a certain way, and they were able to make customizations to that calculator to work specifically for our plan. And then I said I would revisit this. So this is our letter to our stakeholders, our department heads and union leaders. And the union leader outreach is really something that is a little newer. And we're really kicking ourselves for not thinking about it sooner, but they really have a lot of sway with their members. And when we share this data, it kind of creates a good framework for talking about how we can conduct outreach together. And we are trying to roll out auto enrollment, and in the way that works in California is you can't do a uniform for all of your employees. We need the buy-in from each union. And so this helps us create that dialogue with the unions and kind of explain why we think it's important that auto enrollment be adopted for their population. And this last slide here, I think these are just some words of encouragement and things to keep in mind that we keep in mind when we sometimes can feel overwhelmed by our goals. And so the first step is just incrementalism. You know, we're not trying to change everything overnight. We're not trying to do leaps and bounds. We're trying to do one step at a time, slow and steady progress that's thoughtful and deliberate and meaningful. Experimentation, don't be afraid to try new things, even if we're gonna fail once in a while. I am very comfortable with failure if it means that we learned something along the way. So if, you know, we had this great initiative that we thought would be impactful, then, but it didn't pan out, that's okay as long as I have some kind of insight I can share with our policymakers that will help us down the road. And then trajectory, I always just think about whether we're on the right path and whether we're going the right direction. If we're trying to scale the mountain, make sure we're going up and not down. And it's okay to not, again, just have leaps and bounds progress. We just need to make the slow and steady steps in the right direction. And so some of the ways this has brought clarity for our plan is if you were to look through some of our board reports, you would see that we reference our goals all the time. When we talk about enrollment, automatic enrollment and why it's important, we reference back to our goals around participation and contributions. We're contemplating a deemed IRA for our plan. And it's hard to make that decision. There's a lot of administrative considerations and plan design considerations, but we look at it through the framework of our goals. And does it help us retain retirees? And does it help participants save a little bit more for retirement? And because it does, we think that makes sense for us to pursue. And then the same kind of idea with advisory services here, which is something we're contemplating now. So hopefully, you maybe find that interesting, and that, we're always just happy to share what we're working on and the successes we have and the failures we have, and that's all part of the process. So my email address is there if you ever want to reach out, and we're always looking for other partners who like to talk about these things and dream up new goals together.
All right, thank you very much, Daniel. We'll pause here. We haven't received any questions, but I'll give you a minute in case anybody wants to type something in real quick. We'll wait and see if anything comes in. In the meantime, I want to thank everybody for showing up. If you do have a question that we don't get to by the time I finish talking, but you want to send it anyway, please feel free to reach out to us and we'll get in touch with Daniel, or you can get in touch with him directly, and we'll make sure that we do follow up. And actually we did receive one question while I was going there, and the question was for Daniel, is Voya the source of your national benchmark, or do you use other sources, for instance, NAGDCA?
The national benchmark that we used in those letters to the stakeholders was the NAGDCA benchmark, I believe. And in our quarterly reporting, Voya also includes the NAGDA benchmark for our board members.
Well, we're happy to hear that. I did want to follow Daniel's advice. We would appreciate your feedback on this webinar. So be on the lookout for an email from Carly asking you what you thought. We're very interested in that. And as many of you know, we've been experimenting a little bit with our format. For our next webinar, it'll be scheduled in the fall. And we are going to do something a little different again. We asked our industry members to send us their best examples of collaboration between industry and plan sponsors. We've received some really fantastic ideas, and we'll be sending you some more information once we pick the topic that we want to go. And we did get a couple more questions in. Daniel, for you, can you speak a little more about your goals related to risk tolerance patterns that you share with the board?
Oh, sure. And I'm sure this is in reference to, there was a board report where we mentioned risk tolerance. We actually don't have goals around that. That's just something that we were reporting on, just trends and utilization. So we were looking at, you would kind of assume that younger employees might, we have risk-based funds, younger employees might be more risky, and older employees may be more conservative. And so we were just trying to really see, is that true for our plan? And it generally was, but not to the extent you would expect, but we don't have goals around those right now.
All right, and one last one. How does Power BI import all of the data it uses for reporting?
There are a million ways Power BI can bring in data. We generally have it pull from an Excel spreadsheet, and we actually anonymize the data before importing it, so we take out anything that's personally identifiable. And one thing I didn't note about Power BI that makes it really great is you can swap out, you can update that spreadsheet with new updated data. So we do that every quarter, and you don't have to amend any of your visualizations or charts.
All right. Well, fantastic. And thank